Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. It's a little after 3 o'clock here in Chicago. The river is still green. And I'm joined by Bobby Kogan, who has been with us before. He is the Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress. He has had leadership roles in the Senate Budget Committee and at OMB. Bobby, welcome.
Edwin, thanks so much for having me back.
Hey, look, can I start with this? DOGE was meant to save taxpayers a fortune. Instead, it seemed to be a costly failure. I think Trump's spending $1 billion a day in Iran, and he has billions in refunds from the tariffs on top of tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. What kind of a hole is he digging for us?
Yeah, I mean, if you think that DOGE was about making the government more efficient, it didn't do that. In fact, it led to massive increase in efficiencies. It's going to raise the cost of contracts in the future now that companies are going to kind of price in the possibility that the government will renege on its contract later. That sort of thing is obviously deeply inefficient. We had the war, as you say, which $1 billion, maybe even $2 billion a day, close to. The official estimate was $11.3 billion for the first 6 days of the war, which works out to a little bit under two. These things, that's just the munitions cost. Obviously, there's going to be, all the rebuilding that we have to do from our own, our own kind of destroyed assets and that sort of stuff. Just to say, this administration has never shown any interest in being efficient, right? If they were looking for efficiency, they wouldn't have done a $4 trillion or $5 trillion tax cut. If they were looking for efficiency, they wouldn't be kicking vulnerable people off of Medicaid, which is going to, and taking away people's health, taking away people's food, all these things that lead to lower productivity for them in the future, lower tax base. But instead, they're pushing the things that they want to do, right? Iran has been on the president's mind for a very long time, especially Pete Hegseth's mind and a lot of the generals. This is something they've wanted to do, and it's not really about the budgetary impact. It's about what they want. They want to appear tough. They want to flex. They want to use the things that they've been buying with the military budget. And sure enough, they have been using a lot of these missiles, cost $13, $14, $15 million per missile. And we've been going through our stockpile, years worth of stockpile in just a couple days, despite senior members of the military recommending in as strong terms as possible against it, going in without a plan, right? We saw that some people said, hey, boss, we're really worried that this is going to spike oil prices, and the president said, "No, don't worry about it." And now, just the other hour, he said it's going to be a team effort to clean up the mess that they didn't plan for. So I think the resounding thing we've seen is folks jumping in when they don't necessarily have a plan, they haven't necessarily thought it through. They think they'll be able to wing it.
Yeah, and I asked you about the costs in part because that's, unbelievable expertise you have. But I want everybody listening to pay attention to the way Bobby answered it, because the costs are only part of it. Really, the question when you decide to go to war is it a war you should be in? What is it a war you need to be in? Is it a moral war? Is it defensible to be in the killing business like this? And in this case, I think the answer is no. No.
Yeah. No is the right answer. I mean, I'd say, look, I'm 35. My entire life has been wars that have horrendously backfired. On paper, if you ask folks, on paper, removing the Taliban from power was going to be an unequivocally good thing for the world. On paper, removing Saddam Hussein from power was going to be an unequivocally good thing for the world. And instead, we destabilized entire regions of the world that led to hundreds of thousands of direct deaths, and if you count indirect effects, millions of deaths. We made the very people that we were ostensibly trying to help significantly worse off, allegedly in pursuit of something good, but instead We harmed a whole bunch of folks. We spent trillions of dollars. We killed millions of people. It was wasteful in every capacity. It was wasteful from a budgetary impact. It was wasteful from a human life impact. We did the exact opposite. I do budget stuff for a living, right? And so I can go out here, I can say, oh, what does $11.3 billion mean, right? Like $11.3 billion, that could have been 1.5 million people on Medicaid instead, right? Like I can tell you that. I can tell you about priorities. But the real effect here, as you say, right, this is the moral impact. We are killing people. One of the first things we did was we bombed a school. We bombed a girls' school, and we killed 175 kids. That's one of the first things that we did. And the president tried to blame it on Iran when our own military was like, that actually seems to be us, right? So, I don't know what to say other than I wish we had different leadership.
Yeah, I mean, again, just to stay on this topic for a second, from the perspective of Israelis on October 7th, getting rid of Hamas seemed like it would be exactly the right thing to do, right? They'd taken hostages, brutally killed people, and now all this time later, you have Hamas is still there, and Gaza is a complete ruin. It looks like the only strategy Donald Trump has for Iran is to turn a country of 92 million into Gaza, which was, not quite 1 million. I mean, just the most dreadful war crime kind of thinking imaginable.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. And I would just say our Secretary of Defense, I mean, there's a reason he wants to rename it the Department of War. It's because that's how he views it, right? And you see, he doesn't say this in exact words, but it's very, you don't have to, it's very clear what he means. He thinks that the rules of war are woke, right? He basically says that we're not going to be bound by the Geneva Conventions. We're not going to be bound by limitations, right? He thinks that that's the things that he eschews. It's the things that he decries. He thinks that we shouldn't have to abide by international law here, and we aren't. I mean, and as simple as that, we aren't, right? The United States is like a few countries in the world that is not officially officially not signed on to a lot of these things. Now, of course, we are committing crimes against, that we ourselves think are illegal, right? Just the other day, maybe it was earlier today or maybe it was yesterday, the Secretary of Defense said that he would give no quarter, which, of course, is extremely
Which is, of course,
illegal.
a war crime. Yep, it's a war crime.
Yeah, this is a war crime. But inside of all of this is that it's a tough guy attitude where these folks are cosplaying being, super warriors and instead condemning other people to die, right? It's
and let's be clear, it's an extension of a domestic behavior. Hundreds and hundreds of judges appointed by Republicans as well as Democrats, even judges appointed by Donald Trump have said, with respect to the government's use of force in the United States, they're violating the law. And they continue to violate the law. And they continue to go to court and lie about it. And judges said so. So this isn't just, you and me talking about on the other side of the world. This is a lawless administration. And now they're being lawless with the most powerful military on the planet.
That's right. And in fact, one of the most forceful rebukes of DHS behavior came from a Reagan-appointed judge who quoted Ronald Reagan. He was doing the Beacon on the Hill quote, right? Because some of these folks are, they're apoplectic about it. And to your point, that is exactly, this kind of like no limitations is something they have, they feel very strongly. They don't want to be limited, but I would just, obviously this is my bleeding heart, whatever, but I feel like those limitations are what make us stronger. It's what gives us the moral clarity here, right? Like we reject the idea that just because we can, that makes it okay. I used to work in the Senate Budget Committee. I watched the Senate Budget Committee hearing the other day, and it was on sanctuary cities. And one of the Democratic witnesses is David Beer of Cato. David is not a Democrat, but he was one of the witnesses here.
Close to a Democrat. Yep.
Yeah, not a Democrat. Not Ted Kennedy. Sorry, John Kennedy, the senator
from Louisiana.
He said, "Oh." Yeah, exactly. That's right. From Louisiana, was reading some of his tweets back to David. And he said, "Oh, look at how extreme you are, David." And David, one of his tweets said, the U.S. members of the Senate and House who said who got in trouble with some heavy quotes for saying refuse illegal orders. He said, actually, that didn't go far enough. They shouldn't have just said refuse illegal orders. They should have also said it's also your duty to refuse immoral orders and unethical orders, because there are plenty of things that are legal but still unethical. And Kennedy said, Kennedy kind of attacked him for that. And David responded and said, Senator, like, do you disagree? Do you think that they should follow unethical orders? And Kennedy just moved on. But, you could tell he was angry and flustered. And I think that speaks to something real here. There is a fundamental disagreement on what is ethical and what is owed to fellow human beings, right? Like, I go back to Iraq, I go back to Afghanistan because they were fun. They were important in my, me developing my idea of like what made sense and what was okay, because that was when I was coming of age. And I can't imagine millions of people having their lives snuffed out, never getting to experience the things they wanted ever again, because our president jumped in without a plan. His hubris and his ineptitude led to millions of dead people who just wanted nothing more than to love their family. Right? That's all they wanted. They wanted to live, they wanted to laugh, and they wanted to love their family and their friends and just experience life. And we have already led to thousands of dead civilians. And of course, we've destroyed water, sanitation. And the president is threatening every day to do something much worse. I don't think he's going to drop a nuke, but like the way that he's talking, he's basically threatening to drop a nuke if he doesn't get what he wants. And so,
and he doesn't even say what he wants. So it's impossible to comply.
Right.
But, and I know that region very well. I've worked there in that part of the world for 15 years. I worked there all the time. And what he has risked, I mean, these are big countries with 90 million in Iran, 70 some million in Saudi, lots of people in the other Gulf states with no water. So they rely on a handful of desalination plants. If they get hit, if they are somehow taken out in this war, there is just simply not enough water for people to survive for a week. So the risks are off the charts, and they didn't think about it. They didn't think about closing the Straits of Hormuz. They're beyond incompetent. I mean, they shouldn't be allowed, to be crossing guards at a school, let alone be in charge of weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Well, let me change the subject because this one's too depressing. And just for a minute, talk about how Donald Trump has raised prices on every single American with his tariffs. And then, oops, the Supreme Court says they're illegal, so I'm going to double down on them because nobody tells me what to do. I mean, the Supreme Court gave him a gentle out, for God's sake. They could have saved him from his political mistake.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's so interesting because, there are lots of reasons that Donald Trump won. But in my opinion, the thing that was kind of the most salient is a lot of people saw the economy of 2019 when he was president. They said, things are pretty good right there. And they said, I want to return, I want to return to that era where I felt good economically. The president ran on addressing affordability issues. He ran on making things kind of feel right again. He ran on lowering prices. And instead, the president doesn't have that many levers, but where the president has levers, President Trump has made things worse in basically every single way. So one way is that he kicked millions of people off their health insurance and took food away from millions of people. Another way is that he has unilaterally, illegally raised prices on all imported goods. That's the tariffs, right? And so, the estimate is that we're talking like the average household is like $1,700 worse off per year, and this actually it hits the poorest the hardest because, if you're rich, you do a lot of your money can be savings. But if you are poor, if you're working, if you're just trying to make sure that you can afford to make ends meet,
it's a massively
you're spending every dollar
tax.
you have. Exactly. And so yeah. So you have all of that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go on, Edmund.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so you got all of that. President claimed that he had this power under IEPA, which he didn't. Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional. The liberals say, hey, the text doesn't allow you to do this. And then, based on the plain reading of the text, three of the six conservatives say, use the major questions doctrine, which is something they've been using to kind of nuke a lot of regulation, and say that applies here. They gave him the out. It's the more, it's the less crazy of the six of them. President turns around and says, okay, well, I'm going to use a different authority instead. He says, I'm going to use Section 122 for now, and then work to Section 232 stuff, right? And so he says, I'm going to do the same thing, and imposes the same thing on people. It's weird. It doesn't really make any sense. Some of our countries, the way that he's doing now is kind of a flat rate. It's higher in some countries, lower in other countries. But the takeaway from all of this is that it's one of the few things the president really wants to do. He really, really, really believes in making imported goods be more expensive. Now, it doesn't really make any sense conceptually. I guess the way that I'd put it to you is that it's based on this idea that trade is bad and that we should be self-reliant on everything we do. But we are all better off if we can choose how we want to use our services. And the way that I'd put it is I have a trade deficit with my local Chinese restaurants. I can make Chinese food, but I'm not that great at it. So I give them money, and they give me goods and services, and so I have a trade deficit with them, and we're both better off for it, right? They're happy to get my money. I'm happy to get their Chinese food. That's a good thing. And so the United States government and the government, the businesses and individuals do this with goods produced not by them and goods produced overseas, and that's okay. And the president says, no, we should make that more expensive. So we're in this crazy place. So the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional. Like what you did was illegal. Ostensibly, then these businesses are owed money for the taxes that were illegally imposed on them. The Trump administration has been a complete 180 when they were arguing in court why they ought to be able to do this. It's because it's all really easy. Now they say it's impossibly hard to do. So they do a 180 on kind of their justification. And so now they say, well, no one's kind of owed any money, and they just want to keep doing it. They didn't take their out, and that's it. It's one of the few things that they are truly, truly, truly believe in. Trump doesn't believe in most things. He believes in deportations. He believes in taxes on imported goods, these tariffs.
Yeah, he believes in lining his own pocket, and he believes that if we have to give refunds, that's going to be a problem for a Democratic president after he's gone, because he's not going to follow the law until then to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
This is going to be a problem for the next president.
Well, yeah, it's also there are lots of ways in which this is pretty tough, right? Like one very real thing is that. So the estimate is you take all the tariffs together, and it's about a kind of a net effect of about $200 to $300 billion of increased revenue at the expense in kind of the worst way, the least efficient way that hits the poorest the hardest, and then also that is kind of economically inefficient because it kind of goes against people using their dollar in the way that they want to use their dollar.
Yes, correct.
Next president saddled with this because if we take them away, we've just made the deficit situation about $2.5 trillion, maybe $3 trillion worse. But at the same time, if you leave them in place, everyone understands that this is bad for growth. It's bad for innovation. It's kind of bad for equity. The economy now it's not bad. It's not good. The way that I would frame it is the economy is susceptible to shocks, right? Like the unemployment rate
like wild oil prices.
Yeah, for instance,
the
right?
shocks he's giving us. Yeah.
So that's exactly right. So the unemployment rate is a good rate. The problem is it's been creeping up and up and up and up and up and up, right? The employment level is a good level, but the problem is that it's not growing fast enough. That's right. So the economy is fine, but it is teetering insofar as like we believe that it is susceptible to problems, and this is where the tariffs are really problematic. It's a major shock to the system. It's where the deportations are really problematic. It's a horrendous shock to the system on top of kind of the moral problem with that, and it's where the oil prices, right? The oil prices, back in the 70s was one of the major shocks here. And it all comes back to the lack of planning where the president...
And one more, the potential of an AI bubble. So all of this is frightening.
Yeah, sure, definitely. The bubble thing is very, 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 very worrisome. And it's yet another thing that where the president is actually, jumping right in, right? AI is obviously a very complicated thing, but the president is jumping in, and it's where he's just doing whoever's going to pay him. And he's not interested in kind of smart regulations around it.
On the contrary, they're trying to put one of these companies out of business because they didn't want to play. So Anthropic, they want them out of business.
That's one of that's one of the most quintessential Trump things, right? Where he rewards the businesses that will bribe him and do whatever he wants, and he attacks the businesses that won't. Anthropic has a lot of problems, but I think their red lines were not early enough in the process. But the idea of the United States government trying to sink a company because it wouldn't do Skynet killbots, and because it wouldn't do like Batman, Batman the Dark Knight style mass surveillance, that was enough for them to say, okay, we're going to kill you forever. Yeah,
this is who they are. I mean, Brendan Carr, the guy who runs the Federal Communications Commission, has threatened, public broadcasters if they don't salute the president every morning, with the Star-Spangled Banner and talk about the great patriotic war we're fighting. And he says, okay, well, you know what? Maybe we'll pull your broadcast license. They literally are running a mobster government. Right. In the short time we have left, I want to ask you a complicated question. Democrats are starting to think about what a new tax system might look like. And I do not want to talk about any of the proposals that are out there now, because it's the beginning of a conversation. But I'd like your thoughts about the principles that legislators should aim for if and when Democrats get control, to have a fairer, a system that begins to address this enormous wealth imbalance, that begins to address the stability of government revenues, and is good for the economy.
Yeah, it's an awesome question. A couple different things. I think we need to go after tax. We need to go after the ways in which the richest legally are not paying. Right. We have this big problem where we are undertaxing capital. You and I get paid for our wages, and that is taxed on the income side and the payroll side. But a lot of what the rich people do is they get their money from the fact that they already have money, and that's taxed at a much lower rate. And they sometimes reclassify their income in kind of these special ways. So when I was working in the Biden administration, we put our heads together and we came up with as many different ways as we thought were kind of smart in going after making sure that we tax capital like we tax ordinary income. So that's got to be one of the most quintessential things. You cannot go after their money if you are not serious about taxing capital. So that's one of the most quintessential things. We need to find a way to tax the rich more, and we need to find a way to kind of go after all both their avoidance and their evasion. Right. So that's both funding that's both funding the IRS better, and also going after the specific ways that they avoid and evade. Number two, and I think this is the other thing, is that we need to ask ourselves what we want society to look like, what we think the government's role is. And sometimes taxes are to fix very specific societal problems, right? If we have if we have way too much wealth at the top, and if we're trying to disincentivize specific things, sometimes taxes serve that purpose. But the rest of taxes are to fund society, right? We don't tax people when we're taxing people for Social Security and Medicare, we aren't doing that out of like spite or anger. We aren't doing that to punish them. We're doing it because we believe everyone should pay in, and everyone then should benefit. And so we need to basically ask ourselves what we think the purpose of taxation is, and then what we think we're trying to fund with it. What do we want to do, right? That we are in the midst of a debate about what we want society to look like, what we think the government ought to provide, where it should be involved, where it shouldn't be involved. And in my strong opinion, we need, like, the tax code needs to reflect that. It ought to be a reflection of what we are trying to do with our society.
Yeah, I've heard ideas. I mean, it goes back to talking about an ownership society. What is there somebody floating a plan where, the government owns a piece of every corporation in America, and that somehow the public then benefits from the growth and value of private companies?
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of different ways that you could do that. You can do it in the direct, kind of the Nordic style. Sometimes have direct ownership, but conceptually, some of the
It's a little
taxes
bit
that
what we used
some
to call communist, but Donald Trump's already done it with some companies.
Well, and that's true. He has taken a direct stake in some things. I guess what I was also going to say is that conceptually, we think that, like, capital taxes are doing that. To the extent that everyone's getting richer and to the extent that there is a massive buildup in capital, we are then kind of taxing those gains, right? That is conceptually doing the same sort of thing where we say, cool, you've won, and we're going to take this and we're going to make sure that everyone gets to benefit from that. There are ways to do it kind of either way that achieves the same purpose. Of, we want a society where if we're all winning, then if we're winning, then we all should benefit from it. We want a society where instead of having just the few getting the benefit and reap the rewards from society winning, where we should all get that.
Well, I thank you for that, and I know just that there are Democrats beginning to sort of float ideas. I don't think anybody's where we ought to be yet. But do you know about are a lot of people working on this and thinking about it? And will we be ready, should we actually gain back control, to take steps that we need to make our economy work for everyone?
We're definitely lots of people are putting thoughts into. A lot of my colleagues, are doing stuff on the tax side, on utilities, on housing. Everyone's kind of putting that in. Finance committee, right? Like Ron Wyden had a proposal on mark to market, which is one attempt at doing capital. I would say lots and lots and lots of smart people are doing great thinking around this. Step number one, we have to come up with the great ideas. But step number two, we need to make sure that we're willing and ready to do it. I think, when we were trying to do Build Back Better, which died, and instead we got the Inflation Reduction Act, which itself then kind of changed from its initial iteration of what we thought we were going to do. Obviously, a lot of blame goes to, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, but they were kind of useful scapegoats for us to not really think about and address some of the internal problems we had among the rest of the caucus for some of the revenue raisers we wanted to go for. I'll just tell you, I was working at the White House at the time. There were a lot of vigorous debates, and there was a lot more problem than just appeared under the hood when we were first playing with Build Back Better. We had a lot of problems in the House. We had a lot of problems in the Senate. Obviously, it did pass the House, but I can tell you it passed the House because they knew it was going to change. A lot of work is being done, but so number one, we have to come up with the great ideas. But number two, we need to make the case. We need to make the affirmative case. And I would just say on taxation, people don't support taxes if they don't believe in what they're for. And so we also need to be making the direct argument about how and why government can be helpful. There are lots of ways in which government can be actively not helpful, like, for instance, what we're doing in Iran. But there are ways in which the government can be directly helpful. We lift 30 million people out of poverty every single year, and we can and do more.
We can, indeed. We can make it possible for people to have the lives they should have if they work hard in this country. Absolutely. And when you're talking about things the government shouldn't do, I just parenthetically, you and I don't have time to talk about this, but a part of the government is shut down right now because Democrats will not fund what is going on right now in the government.
That's right.
Bobby, thank you so much. I mean, we're out of time, but I really appreciate it every time we get a chance to talk.
Edwin, the pleasure is always mine.
Would you just tell people before you go if they want to follow your work and learn more where they can go?
Sure. So I work for the Center for American Progress. You can read if you just search Bobby Kogan, Center for American Progress. You'll find my bio. You can read the papers I put out. I also post on Blue Sky at BBKOGAN. BDKOGAN and Blue Sky, and that's where I say all the things that I should or shouldn't say.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Edwin. You too.